So good morning, everyone. I'm CJ Reynolds. Welcome to the Resilience and Energy Assessment of Communities and Housing webinar. This is our first webinar of the series that we're going to be doing with the Florida Housing Coalition, which I'm very honored to be collaborating with them. We've had a great partnership. Today, we're going to talk about the principles for resilient affordable housing and this new checklist and the self-assessment plan. So I'm going to go through some housekeeping real quick. So if we can, we'll talk a little bit about REACH. We'll have a little connection point to get some information from you. Then we'll turn it over to Gladys and Alyssa and also Juanita, who will walk us through that. So if all of you can please mute yourself, keep microphone muted when not speaking, and if you have to call in, I guess to press *6 will mute you. This webinar is being recorded, so we can use that, and it will be also available at our website. In addition to the PowerPoint itself, will be available for use. We encourage you to, since there's quite a lot of you on the participating today, we won't be doing breakout sessions, but we will ask you to submit all of your ideas through the chat, and then we'll have Q&A and discussions at specific points to clarify the different things on as we go through them. So right now, for all of you who are on here, if you would please post your name and title and organization and your interest in housing resilience. So you can use that as my interest is, I'm concerned about X. I have to do this crazy plan update, or I've got some other bigger concerns about policies and we want to talk about it. So if you can take a few minutes to just go ahead and post your name, title, or name an organization and your interest in housing resilience, that would be great. While you do that, I'm going to give you just a little bit of background. So many of you have been involved in this thing called the Resilience Coalition, which is an initiative under the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. The coalition was formed in 2018, has 31 members, 7 counties, 24 municipalities, and it also includes 90 plus stakeholder partners, which is a range of organizations, nonprofits, business associations, university collaborators, private sector consulting firms, and it's just a really exciting group of people who have been providing a lot of input to a variety of programs. This is continuing to go forward with a variety of initiatives, so many of you have heard about it, and we appreciate the leadership of our chair, our coalition chair, Janet C. Long, who's a Pinellas County Commissioner. So the catalyst for this REACH webinar and the whole REACH concept really goes back to 2019 when we worked with staff in Manatee County and the UF Resilient Initiative, or Communities Initiative. And at the time I was at the USF College of Marine Science, where we focused on a DEP resilient planning grant that was focused on the peril of flood. So part of the process was to review the plans that Manatee County had, work with staff, in-house GIS experts to map sea level rise inundation for housing and also socioeconomic vulnerability impacts. And you can see a lot of the work that they've done on their website. And also to have an engagement meeting with both staff and stakeholders. And additional outcomes of that were some regional activities where our office began taking a look at all of the mobile home parks in the region and mapping the boundaries of CRAs and looking at inundation impacts to, or exposure and risk to the CRAs and what that might mean. And then we had a really interesting series of meetings to talk about how CRA managers are involved, to what extent in any resilience initiatives, and what kind of data they themselves might need, and how might the TIFs and all of that be impacted. So that was really the impetus for it, and it led to helping us understand the need for consistency on certain things such as age of housing stock, type and category of housing stock, and that's where we made our great connection with the University of Florida Schimberg Center folks as well. That led to submitting a proposal to JP Morgan Chase Foundation with this team of folks, and I have been wanting to work with the Florida Housing Coalition for a number of years. I would periodically call up Gladys and then just try to pick her brain and see if I could gain some insights from it. So The team for the Tampa Bay region includes the Florida Housing Coalition, the Schimberg Center, and USF, Florida Center for Community Design and Research, which is also has been working extensively on community vulnerability with Hillsborough County and the city of Tampa, and the United Way Suncoast, because of the importance of their data and coordination with nonprofits, the community, and also Alice, which was very important to us. So I'm privileged to be a part of a great team, which also in our office includes Kara Sarah, who's our comprehensive resiliency planner, and Simone Chapman this year, who is on loan from the National Academy of Sciences. She's a Gulf Research Program Science and Policy Fellow. So she's been working with us on equity and health impacts as well. You'll meet later Gladys Cook, the Director of Resilience and Recovery Directory. Blaise Denton was a key person in helping us to develop the tool. Juanita Jones, also a planning and technical advisor and providing perspective on equity and for communities and frameworks. And then Alyssa Plancher, who's also been involved in a lot of the analysis. So you'll hear from at least 3 of them. Blaise is not on the call today. So we're going to cruise right through the objectives to give you a sense of what is this grant? What is this project really intending to do? Well, it's consistent with most of the other work with the Regional Planning Council, as well as the coalition, which is to really develop consistent frameworks, methods, and metrics for our efforts. And that, in this case, is evaluating community vulnerability and also affordable housing risks in that context. Many local governments have been on this path already, conducting vulnerability assessments of critical infrastructure, roadways, and other major public assets. Now, this is the shift to focus on the aspects of what is the community vulnerability. So we'll also, through this project, be creating standardized approaches and methodologies for mapping housing inundation and risk zones, defining new approaches for assessing housing energy consumption and what are the opportunities that we can use through policies, new programs for creating more efficient, energy efficient and resilient homes. Also creating a regional roadmap. And so a lot of the work that this project has already been doing, and we're underway for just a year now, is providing insights to the Regional Resilience Action Plan, which Kara is leading. So if I can ask, some of you might have not muted yourself yet. If you can, that would be helpful so everyone else can hear. So the last bit of it, as we mentioned, was integrating Alice into our resilience context. We're talking about a category of our population that works very hard, is employed, has very challenged or limited assets, but is really substantially impacted and not often addressed through publicly assisted programs. So a goal of ours was to really work on supporting updates to integrate these things into your plans. With all the amazing talent through the Florida Housing Coalition and our university partners, providing technical assistance to update these tools. And then, ultimately the outcome is how do we begin to prioritize construction in less vulnerable areas that are also connected to transportation. And a big part of this goal is that we really need to have these things integrated and working hard to support each other. The hope for this is our goal is to really facilitate interdepartmental information and data sharing cross agencies as well as regional. And we know we've seen more and more collaboration through the meetings with the coalition, where peers get together and discuss key components from, let's say, discussing and developing energy efficiency programs as well as getting buy-in. So we hope that this comes out, that we establish a community of practice that is to be determined based on your goals and desires and how useful, but to really tackle some of the most thorniest issues of housing and resilience together and define a common vision for increasing resilient, affordable, and attainable housing. A lot of the work that we've been doing with the coalition is on the right side. You see that many of you know the Climate Science Advisory Panel establishing different scenarios for us to use in our plans, our capital improvement budgets. So how we begin to think about how sea level rise as well as short-term hurricane preparedness and disaster are significant to us. In addition, this past year, the Tampa Bay Partnership has published again, of course, their regional equity report, which really points to the issue of how housing affordability jobs, wages, income needs to be understood by race, not just by overall population. So that's what we're working towards here. I know many of you are already doing these amazing things. So the point of this is, how can we do it in a way that starts to have some consistency? So when we're cities next to each other within counties, we can begin to understand when we say community vulnerability and we look at this, what will that take? So this is where the USF team is working to develop a community vulnerability assessment methodology and a user guide that will be looking to release that in May. Of course, the new housing checklist that we're talking about today, and our colleagues at the University of Florida updating their housing flood mapper, which was previously developed. And we'll also be conducting and offering a GIS mapping analysis for specific locations to test what kind of data, what do we see, how do we create consistency in identifying this, so it becomes easy to understand age or category of housing at risk to what kind of flood vulnerabilities. So these are things that are going to be released over the year with additional feedback opportunities. The other part of it was really, which was a tremendous benefit to us. Many of you may be aware of the Pinellas Health and All Policies program, which funded through the Healthy St. Pete Foundation, 3 planners in different positions. And we began working with Daphne and Caitlin to really understand what were they looking at and how do we need to consider health in the context of resiliency pattern. And so this has become embedded and now integrated into a lot of these things. And housing is a key part of ensuring health as well as the neighborhood component. In addition, Simone has created a new resource document, which is a compilation of climate, health, and equity planning frameworks, plans themselves, and also other reports from national level to state and local, to models of best practices and language from other cities who have implemented different kinds of plans. This is also available embedded in the checklist that we will be releasing today, and it's also on the TBRPC website. So before we turn it over, the aspect of the Florida Housing Coalition's role and how important they were to this was to really help us review the existing federal and state policy and plans with a specific housing mitigation lens. Then we're a fan of creating crosswalks at the Regional Planning Council, building off some work from the previous CCMP with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, looking at different plan elements, looking at different policy elements. How can we better understand how these things can work harder and more effectively together? And then as some outputs from these meetings, by the end of the grant, developing some model language with input from you. We have many experts on here and very excited to see a number of consultants, planning experts to help us work through that. And then part of this is, if you go through the process, if you sign up to do these checklist assessments, you will have technical assistance through this process to support your priorities, to further iterate on your updates. And of course, one of the most significant things they're working on with us is giving us perspective to what should we know and have and include in the regional action plan under the context of housing and placemaking and people and education and flood and capacity building. So it's been a great partnership so far, and we look forward to the next year on this and involving you as well. So we're going to talk about this briefly. They'll go more into the details. The context on this process is that some of you gave us input. We had input meetings last October. We know that the crosswalk of resilience and affordable housing, that there may be a number of some of the older plans or the plans that exist today that are approved may not reflect your current ideas and your future direction and goals. We've also heard from you that approaches to comprehensive plans are changing. That they may be more streamlined, so you don't have tons of things to update that are perhaps overlapping or duplicative. They're also perhaps going to be more integrative and thematic versus legal, and also public facing. So when you think about the context of the checklist that we're showing you, we're really not saying this is what should be done, but these are the thoughts we want and hope everyone will think about. How you then interpret and ingest that information, how it gets used that ultimately is your community's direction and goals, right? So we want to just say that this is a beta version. We know that there's things that we want to keep changing ourselves, but we wanted to get it out in front of you. And most importantly, we want to make revisions based on your experience and needs and recommendations from the planning and legal and floodplain experts as we go through this. So we'll be reaching out to some of you as expertise. You really are the first cohort in this. I hope that doesn't scare you away, but give you enthusiasm to understand that not only are you, this is the thing that can potentially benefit yourself, but can really help us in a broader perspective. Ideally, this becomes a document that is used across the state. We even had some folks register from counties outside of our region. So I'm very excited about that, and we're open to that. So those are the key things. I wanted to reassure you that the checklist, if you do commit to completing and going through these process for your own checklist, we're going to ask for you to send them to us because part of our process is to create this combined summary for learning and sharing. However, we will not distribute or post on our website any individual completed checklists. Those are really for internal analyses. Of course, we're all public and everything is open. However, we really feel that it's important to better understand the combined summary of opportunities for strengthening programs, creating new dynamic energies, and addressing things that have been done in old ways, right? And so that's really what's about. How do we go forward? So this is the first of 3 sessions. Session 2 and 3 will really focus on the priorities that you define. So once we go through these processes and you each individually complete your list, then we'll have a vote and we'll take polls. What is most important to you? Should we really talk about an amazingly integrative housing element with lots of key points in model language that can help you use that in whatever component? Or do we have some policies and goals associated with the future land use element? Or is there something you want to see in the LHAP? So these are things that while you're thinking about your own work, thinking about what are the tools you're going to want to help you succeed in getting more buy-in and making the changes to your future updates. So we talked about the webinars. These are the dates. We're hoping that you leave today and you decide, yeah, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to tackle this, at least 1 or 2 plans we want to cross-check. Setting up your meetings and then sending the checklist. We are asking by March 12. So it's basically a month to hold a couple of these meetings. And we understand that you've got a lot going on. So this is why we say you don't have to complete all, X number of the plans, but selectively pick a few. And then we will reconvene on March 30th. And that's when the Florida Housing Coalition team will present the synthesized overview. What did we find? We're going to roll everything up and we're going to show it back to you and have really good discussion. So today we'll be mostly telling you what it is. Next session, you'll be telling us, no, this is really what it is. This is what we found. This was our experience. This is our ideas. This is where we want to go down the path for here. And then April 13th, that session will really focus on whatever the priorities you define in the second session. So if we say, future land use element, let's just get into the weeds on that and do something related to housing and resilience and that. So that's where this is going to come together. So now I want to quickly turn it over to Gladys, who's going to walk us through the resilience and mitigation component for that. So thanks for that time for the overview.
Hi, everybody. Let me get that up. Okay. Can we do that, please? There. Okay. Sorry, wrong thing. Stop share. Let me start over here. It's the PowerPoint I want, right? Right. There. Okay. Okay, let me make that proper. Doesn't want to do it that way. I don't know why I didn't. Okay, are you seeing housing mitigation pay now or pay later? Okay, all righty. Sorry about that. So I just want to say when CJ and I first started talking about this last January, I had no idea how broad and in-depth it would be. And I had no idea that we would be working with so many great planners and all of your communities. We usually work with your housing providers, so it's just an honor to work with your planners and your emergency management people. And this is so new. And like CJ said, it is beta. And so we're just learning from this. But I want to thank everybody for all of your attention to this. And I hope you stay in it with us for the full checklist. So pay now or pay later, that's housing mitigation. And we know that for the past 5 years, we've had the most active hurricane seasons ever. We're also starting to see the impacts of sea level rise in our communities and the neighborhoods and in our housing stock. And we're always learning lessons. We're seeing a very high level of damage and destruction to housing. Thousands of homes have had major damage from Key West to Pensacola. We've seen catastrophic flooding that includes loss of life. We're seeing our systems impacted. We see that there's prolonged duration of displacement when people are forced into shelters and then they can't even go back home. We are seeing a clear indication that low and moderate and vulnerable populations are disproportionately impacted by natural disasters. Just Irma, 75% of the damage, major damage, impacted people with incomes below 40% of the area median income. And we're seeing a prolonged recovery period. We're not recovered from Matthew from 2016. We're not recovered from Irma, far from it. And Hurricane Michael, we're not recovered. Sally, we're just getting into it. So we've got to address these things. And if that's not enough, our state insurance of last resort, Citizens Wind Insurance, it's at risk of insolvency if we have 2 $50 billion storms in 1 year. So, where do we start? So housing mitigation is kind of the answer to a lot of this. It's retrofitting structures and making the sites safe to make them less vulnerable to natural hazards. And the way you do this is through a risk assessment and looking at each house and each community to measure the resilience and how resilient each community is to these disasters. And of course, one indicator of that resilience is the availability of housing that's affordable to all income groups. So we've developed 7 principles of mitigation, and I'm just going to breeze through those. You're going to see a lot more of this. It's going to become kind of a curriculum for us about how to do mitigation, housing resilience. It's not expensive particularly, and it's not difficult, it's not exotic. It's just simply hardening homes through retrofitting. There's floodproofing, and then the 3 words are connections, connections, connections. And that's also people can shelter in place. If there's a storm, you can get reduced insurance, and then you can use green site standards to make the house more resilient and healthier. And then another one that is a little bit more expensive is buyout and relocation. And a lot of your communities have already had to face this, where whole neighborhoods or whole properties have to be abandoned and build new housing for people. Mobile homes, of course, are very vulnerable to all kinds of disasters. And there's some simple fixes, tie downs and different kinds of enhancements for the window films and carport anchoring. Those things go a long way. But also your older mobile homes can simply be replaced with modern manufactured housing, which is fully meets certain modern codes. And another principle is to prioritize the mitigation of housing for low and moderate income and vulnerable populations. And this is clearly what the Florida Housing Coalition is focused on. Another principle is for incentives and regulations. So you could have financial incentives, development incentives, and then regulations against certain things. Keeping development out of hazardous areas, kind of rewarding with financial incentives to build in less vulnerable areas, making good use of code enforcement for both flexibility to allow repairs and in the valuation of homes in lower income neighborhoods. And then another is just to give people certificates for green and energy certification. Home insurance, both wind and flood, something like 40% of Floridians that need it don't have flood insurance. Sorry, and homes that don't have mortgages that are in flood zones, they are vulnerable to catastrophic loss. So if you have a mortgage, you have to have insurance. And you can, by having the insurance, you can repair your home much faster. And finally, community engagement and competence. And this is just all about making sure that you're targeting your programs and you're using data-driven efforts to engage your residents, to listen and to collect information, and also to pay attention to racial and social disparities that could be embedded throughout the disaster and emergency preparedness programs. So planning. This is, I'm gonna let Alyssa take over now, but this is, the focus of it was, where do we start? And everything begins with a plan, and we have housing assistance plans, and we have mitigation strategies, and we have disaster recovery plans, and so on. So Alyssa is going to show us some of those, the work that we have done since, I think, May. So, you ready?
Yeah, thanks so much, Gladys. And, you know, before we jump into this, we really just want to recognize that there are significant complexities in the planning process. So, having reviewed just a lot of plans and policies starting at the federal level all the way down to the local level, we do understand that there's just a lot that goes into this process. We wanted to acknowledge that. So just to give you some background on what we've been working on, it must have been over the past year, we completed an extensive crosswalk of all regulations. So this is all the way from the federal level to the grassroots local level. And what we were looking for is specific language about like mitigation activities and how it relates to housing. So where does housing appear, like residential development, appear throughout all of these different plans and regulations? And so we created this kind of basic policy crosswalk here. We have a much larger one that wouldn't fit in our presentation. But so you can see we have all of these policies and requirements linked. And it's really important to go back up to the federal level to look at the framework and identify where what you do really originates. So we just wanted to point that out. Let's see. And so we reviewed 27 comprehensive plans. We went through all of your local mitigation strategies, all the local housing assistance plans, post-disaster redevelopment plans. In addition to the significant analyzation of all of your individual plans, we also reviewed land development regulations, rehab standards, code of ordinances, consolidated plans. So we really took a deep dive to look at where housing appears in your planning, resilience planning framework. And we wanted to make sure that we captured really the trickle down from where the regulation originates to the actual policies that are implemented through these programs. And so we were looking for the strong policy language that supports that implementation of mitigation and resilience activities, also consistency among plans. So if there's language stating that you know, your community is really invested in certain mitigation activities, what does that really look like at the public facing level? Like how are these programs implemented in the community? And also, you know, what evidence of coordination among housing practitioners is occurring in disaster planning? So like Gladys said, we may be more familiar at times with your like housing and community development teams, but are these teams working with the planning teams to make sure that like housing mitigation needs are thoroughly addressed in these plans and policies? And let's see, some of the general findings that we identified through this plan review was absence of housing in the strategic planning process. So although there is importance of like, you know, resilient residential development, sometimes it could really be strengthened through policy language, because the policy language may be a little bit more vague, it's not specific, it gives a lot of flexibility. And some of the plans lacked action steps for implementation, so that is a really important piece. And we really didn't see programs for robust community engagement. And also the need for coordination to assess social vulnerability does need improvement. So those are just some general findings. And as an example, from the comprehensive plans and all of these other plans and policies we reviewed, we just wanted to give you some insight on what we were really looking at. And so these examples come directly from the Tampa Bay RPC footprint. The city shall not spend public funds or approve private construction of facilities in the coastal high hazard area. So it's very clear, it's very specific about the use of public funds, or identify and encourage the rehabilitation of substandard housing and expend the available funds in areas with concentrations of substandard housing units. So obviously we know if households have higher income levels, they can afford to mitigate these vulnerabilities in advance. However, it's the substandard housing that really needs that support, because those households can't afford to do that independently and may require the use of public funds. And so another comp plan example, this one we really liked. So the county shall maintain land development regulations that implement the following land use standards pursuant to the guidance provided in this plan. And so it targets specific elements, so especially the conservation element, coastal management element, and utilities element. And obviously this is in regard to new development, as you can see. And what we recognized in here is that while housing and residential development might be kind of embedded in some of the other elements, this doesn't specifically come out and say the housing element is not included. So that's kind of what we're referencing in terms of what's missing and what can really strengthen your community's ability to withstand these potential hazards. And as for the LMS, right here we have some strong examples of developing public support for specific programs that will help with mitigation. And so the programs support retrofit, relocation, acquiring properties susceptible to repetitive flooding, and also adherence to the Florida Building Code standards to meet wind load standards for the county. So that's a great, way to look at that, the consistency and coordination among different plans and regulations. And then on areas that could be strengthened, we have, maximize hazard prevention and mitigation. So what does that really mean? Is that just a statement saying, well, maybe we are going to promote this, but how are you actually going to implement it? And what are the steps you're going to take to ensure that you're maximizing that hazard prevention and mitigation effort? Ooh, whoops, I went back. Or I went forward. And then minimizing non-mitigated development. So it's a great statement, but how are you actually going to do that? And so those are pieces that we pulled out in areas to think about how we can strengthen that for your community's ability to withstand these hazards. And so the benefit of the self-assessment that we're going to be going over shortly is really to help you strengthen your plans and policies based on your own local needs, your evidence-based decision-making. Like CJ said earlier, you do have an opportunity to receive technical assistance from us to craft better resilient policies for your community. And also use the evidence to educate staff and elected officials about the ways to protect your community. And so that's really important. As I referenced the complexity earlier, we know that when you're writing these plans, it has a whole process to go through. So making sure that everybody is on the same page and understands why there's great importance. And also the idea of proactive versus reactive investment. So Gladys talked a little bit about within the principles of mitigation, how there's prolonged recovery how there's displacement, the financial impact. So the idea that either people can be supported and the community can become more resilient through these mitigation activities before hazard occurs, which, you know, we live in Florida where, you know, we have hurricane season every year. So we kind of anticipate that. And with the bill, so as you can see here, I mean, Hurricane Michael was $25.7 billion. And if there are specific ways within the community that we can be the best stewards of these funds and say, all right, if we invest in these areas that we know really need the support, how is that going to impact not just the financial side when there is a catastrophic hurricane, but also the displacement, the disruption of your economy, the health and well-being of your community and its residents, and also the prolonged recovery duration. And so we just wanted to kind of start having that conversation about the importance of housing infrastructure being as important as the rest of the community infrastructure. And you know, what we really want to know from you are, you know, what are your experiences with, you know, planning and creating policies that incorporate mitigation efforts? And, you know, what are these barriers? And is what we're talking about, does that resonate with what you're experiencing? And are you working in coordination with other departments when you are creating these plans? So you guys are welcome to, you know, pop in the chat and talk about, you know, any of these topics or things that you think would be beneficial to you and your community. And we're here to help you out.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was a great summary of the sort of plan analysis. So just wanted to, before we dive into the checklist, just kind of touch base with you guys about, I see from your chats that some of you are now getting ready to conduct, you know, your larger vulnerability assessments, working on different policies and planning things. So if there's any of the technical consultants on the phone. Okay, so Sharon, thanks. Is housing infrastructure, seems like all flood and FEMA stuff just focused on, I'm just trying to pop up your chat to everybody. Sharon, go ahead and just say it out loud.
Well, I was just, oh, I didn't even realize I was off mute. I hope you guys enjoyed all my typing.
No.
But I was just saying, I just kind of heard and I popped in a little late, so I may not have gotten some context, but saying housing infrastructure to me is a little weird unless I'm misunderstanding, because it seems like, you know, everything started with the idea of at least maybe not in the right way from the resilient perspective, but from the like pay for something when a flood happens perspective to look at residential housing. Whereas infrastructure to me is, you know, whether it's hospitals or public works or pipes or something like that. And so, or is it like the infrastructure of, anyway, so I was just trying to.
It's a good question. And it's, we're trying to work on it as more of so housing has often been left out and not thought of in terms of vulnerability assessments. And it's the aspect of, it is the foundation of our community. So we're looking at the mental category of housing as a form of infrastructure, and how we think about when you conduct that vulnerability assessment, you've got your publicly owned assets, and where does the role of housing come into play? It's often out there as this sort of thing that other people can fix and do on themselves. So it's mostly to use some play on words to elevate the importance of housing. It may be confusing, so that's okay. Tell us now.
Hold on a second.
I don't think it's confusing. I think it minimizes when we talk about public infrastructure or critical infrastructure. When there's already, like, housing is, as you say, the foundation, like it started with housing. So it's not maybe being written about or pointed out in our models, except that it is the focus of everything when it comes to a floodplain map.
Got it. Got it. Well, yeah, I think that's important for us to clarify that. And thank you for your framing on that. So I see, Scott,
can I say something about that? Can I, CJ, you know, I really understand why you're asking that. And you know, when you look at the FEMA framework for recovery, housing comes under something called shelter. And when you go through the community lifelines, the things you turn back on as soon as you've had a disaster, what's happened is we get all of our communications open in our hospitals and our water and hazardous toxic things and all that. And then the housing recovery takes 3 years. And we really can't get back to normal till everybody's back home so that the kids can go to school and people can go to work. And so that's why we're trying to say that the housing stock is as important an infrastructure as the others. And I know it's not life and death, you know, in terms of a toxic spill, but we just need to prioritize it more to get back online.
Awesome. Okay.
I cut somebody off. I was going to say something.
No,
I'm
I
sorry.
think there was
Okay.
somebody who was unmuted. So anyway, we just wanted to like open up the door, hear about what you guys were working on and other questions you may have about this, you know, creating that attention to it. In the chat, there is a whole other group of folks working on infrastructure and specialized stations, but this group is focused on housing. So if you're interested in a broader resilience perspective, connecting with your city or the county that you work in, or going to the TBRPC website to read more about it. So, all right, so let's get into this thing now. We've been talking about the background.
I did that. Sorry, I did that again. Let me just buzz through. Fasten your seatbelts. Okay, so we had our little discussion. Okay, so we're going to take you on a little tour through the checklist. And the checklist is an online kind of a spreadsheet. And as any Excel spreadsheet, there's tabs across the bottom. And so we're just going to go through those briefly. You're all going to get a link to your own checklist when you ask CJ for that. And so we'll just show you, give you a little helicopter ride through that, okay? So the first is the table of contents. And Alyssa, I'm going to open the checklist. And do you want to show this, or you'll follow along with the slides? Right? Or are we doing that after Juanita?
Yeah, when we go through the specific plan tabs, I'll
Okay,
follow
so,
along.
so
But
I'm good. Okay,
Yep.
okay.
you're great.
You can see it's kind of complicated. Anyway, so the tabs, we've got a table of contents of all of the different plans that are we reviewed, and that you're going to be looking at your own plans and saying, yes, we do that. No, we don't do that. So these are going to be kind of hot links to get you to these tabs. And then tab 2 is instructions. And this will is that you're going to pick a project lead in your community. There should be one checklist for county and one for each city, but you can have many other agencies within your county work on that. And so like if you have Pinellas County, then you'd have the planner look at the comp plan, your housing department look at the LHAP, your emergency management could look at the LMS, and so on. So you're going to have a lead, okay? So staffs will get their own, you'll have your own plan. And then we're suggesting that you set up meetings, maybe a Zoom meeting, and you put the thing up there and talk about it. You can have people go off on their own and work on it, but part of this process is to help you get together to talk about housing and your plans. So the instructions tab has how to organize your team. Like I said, you're going to need to get your plans together, and so that everybody has the right plan to review. And then I just said all that. So, and then you're going to want to set a deadline for everybody to complete their tabs. There's 8 of them that have to be filled in, and then plan your next meeting date. Now, we want you to finish it by the next webinar so that we can talk about the results. And so the next webinar is when, CJ?
It's March. Go ahead. We'll keep moving.
All righty. Anyway, so there's The only things you can write on are yes, no, NA, or don't know. And so you're just going to be filling in a little check mark for those answers. And then there's also a field where you can comment and say, we don't have that, but we have this, or someone else has that, we don't do that here, things like that. And then the third tab is the scoring and performance categories. And we had to come up with a kind of a rubric so that you would be able to evaluate, self-assess your planning framework. And we have 4 classifications of policies in the checklist. And so it's mandatory, which means it's something you already have to do. A best practice, which is something that's highly recommended and encouraged. There's strong performer, which is maybe something that you have, but you don't really have implementation strategies hammered out with it. And then equity principles. And this is where you're looking at every part of your plans to make sure that you have racial and social equity. And so each of those has a point. So if it's a mandatory policy, you get 1 point. Best practices, if you have it, you get 3 points. Strong performer, you get 2. And then all of your equity principles, you get a 3. So all of that goes into a logic and ends up with a kind of a performance category for you. So these are the categories. And so I want to thank Juanita. She pretty much defined all of this for us. So there's exemplary resilience leader, and that means you got over 90% of all the possible points. And this is for either your plan or your total, the total program. Emerging resilience leader, strong resilience performer, average resilience performer, and at-risk performer. And so nothing is like you get an F or anything like that. It's very encouraging. We're not that critical. We just want to make sure that you know all the different things to aspire to in your planning. And we're never saying people aren't doing a good job. Everybody's working really hard. It's just that we're in new times now. And so we just need to move it up. So Juanita, if you could unmute. Juanita is part of the Florida Housing Coalition's opening next week, Center for Racial Equity. And Juanita is a deep thinker and has a lot of experience in addressing things like this, as well as development background. So she created this tab 6 that in and of itself is an atlas on addressing racial equity in all aspects of your community planning. So Juanita, are you there?
I am here, Gladys, thank you. Well, so I just want to sort of set the stage for this. This is a framework. What we try to do is figure out how we could help you figure, what questions to ask yourself or consider as you're looking at reviewing your policies and plans and programs, right? And so we've taken this based on the Race Forward organization's framework for how to conduct a racial impact assessment. So that's kind of where these questions are coming from. But what we're looking at is you asking yourselves as you're working with your teams and you're figuring out how to make your plans better, these sort of 10 things that I'm going to walk through. So the first one is identifying your stakeholders. Which racial or ethnic groups may be affected by your plan or program should kind of center your thinking when you get started with this. You should be able to figure out, are there people that are traditionally missing from your meetings, from your process, from your discussions, et cetera. And then you want to try and bring those people in the fold. And then identify data and document inequities. And this is about when you're reviewing programs, let's say programs on your LHAP side, what's the data telling you about what communities you're really serving? And if you need to, then move forward towards disaggregating that data by race so that you can see, are there sectors of your community that are not maybe being served the way you would think that they should be or you want them to be? And then 3, engaging stakeholders, inform and meaningfully involve all groups. So that's doing more outreach to make sure that you're reaching out to folks to let them know that your planning processes are going on, what your goals are, where you're trying to go with this, so that they have a chance to be involved in the discussion, they have a chance to impact your decision-making, all of that kind of thing. And then number 4, examine the causes. So as you're looking at the results of, your programs, figure out what factors might be problematic and causing harm to different communities. And then clarifying your purpose. Make it explicit that your goal is to reduce the disparities that are showing up and reduce or stop any levels of discrimination that people might be telling you that they're feeling, or, is a perception or whatever. Really just getting to the bottom of the issue of what you want to be as a community perceived as for all of your constituents and residents. And then we can go to the next slide. So identify adverse impacts. Are there unintended consequences? When you start looking at the programs and examining the data and hearing from the folks that are in your community, you'll get a better sense of how things are actually happening on the ground. And this will tell you if what you're doing is creating friction, and if it is building unintended consequences that you now need to look at how you can reverse that. And then identify equitable impacts. Are there approaches that you're using that can actually promote equity in the impacts for people in your community? Examining alternatives or improvements. What can you change in your program to reduce those disparities that you're seeing? Or can you change to advance equity in a forward-thinking, more positive way? And then ensure viability and sustainability. Is your process filled with accountability measures? So when you're looking at your programming and you're changing it year to year, are you doing some of these things that I just talked about? Are you identifying your stakeholders in the community? Do you know what's happening by race, by religion, by ethnicity, whatever? Are you bringing those folks to the table? Are they involved in the conversation? Are they having meaningful impact and positioned within the discussions that you're having? And are they a part of the new planning that you will continuously review to improve your process year by year? And then define your success indicators. What does that mean in your programs? What does that mean for your plans? How can you move the dial forward? So a couple examples I can give is reducing chronic homelessness for African-American men in the community by some percentage, say 20% per year. When you're sitting down and working with the folks that are managing those programs, having an explicit stated goal will help them figure out, with the data that we have and the impacts and the feedback that we're getting, this is where we are. What do we need to do to change or improve this program and this process going forward? And you can get there by actually just including everybody and understanding what the barriers have been. How can you address changing those barriers? How can you make the good stuff better? All of that. And then another example could be increasing Black home ownership rates in your LHAP with your SHIP dollars, right? So say you want to set a goal of increasing Black home ownership rates by 30% year over year. Actually sit down with your staff and your folks, figure out what you've been doing, where you've been marketing, who's at the table, who's not at the table, to figure out where those gaps are and what your process is, and just fill those gaps. It doesn't have to be complicated or rocket science. It just has to be intentional, and it has to be open to everybody to actually participate, so that we can then, really get to where your public interface with your citizens legitimately lines up with who you think you are and who you say you want to be. And that's just including everybody to get to that point. And I think that's about what I wanted to say there. Turn it over to Gladys.
Wow, thank you so much. I feel like just pausing about that. Okay, now Alyssa's I'm going to go over to the checklist and we're going to talk about it, right? So I'm going to the checklist. Okay.
Yep.
The real thing, okay, which I have open somewhere here.
And while Gladys pulls that up, she's going to pull up the list of baseline plans that are available for your self-assessment. And really the intention is for folks to really identify your plans and supporting documents to review, and to identify if your community adopts plans and policies that are beyond mandatory. And if your housing, I know the term infrastructure as it relates to housing is new, but if that is addressed in your planning. So it looks like Gladys is
okay. I'm on the cover. Okay. Yep. All right. So that's the cover page. And in Excel, this is a Google Doc. You will be your checklist, your personal checklist will be in Google Doc. And so you'll be doing it online, and we're going to give you the link to that. So you can look at everything, all your tabs in this little thing down here. So I mentioned the table of contents, and then there's an about reach. I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it this way. These are hot, so I just want to be careful. So instructions, the scoring and performance, which we've gone through, policy references, which is that crosswalk that Alyssa showed, the housing mitigation best practices, the 7 that I talked about, addressing racial equity from Juanita, and then tab 7 is your baseline plans. And so this is what it looks like. And I'll just scroll slowly down it so you can see that it's not, a huge amount of stuff, but these are the mandatory ones that you have. And then these are best practice if you've gone beyond that and have these additional types of plans. Okay. And down here, you can always just fill in who did this. And it's not, none of that is locked. So you can put anything you want there, and you can put notes down below if you want. But anyway, what you do is you say, yes, we have that. So you just do your little check mark. Okay. And so on down there, right? Like that. Okay. And if you made a mistake, you just backspace over it. Okay. So what do I go to next, Alyssa?
So next are your hazard risk assessments. So that's going to be tab 8.
Now, the baseline plans it. Okay, anyway, this one here has these hazard risk assessments. This is getting more to your emergency management people, but these are some of the mandatory policies by either state law or local ordinances, things like that. Okay, like the HUD consolidated plan has this hazard mitigation part to it. You have to do that if you have a con plan. So you would just mark that yes, no. And then you can always comment. We don't have a consolidated plan, but every county does. And so if you're just a smaller community in a county and you would like to be part of this, but you would just get your county's information on that because you're inside their plan. Okay, so it just goes through these types of hazard assessments. Okay, equity principles. Here's, conducted flood risk or vulnerability assessment specifically for areas with concentrations of low-income residents or by race. These are things that why you're going to need to be together and to talk to each other while you're doing this. Okay, where do I go next?
Comprehensive plan is tab number 9, Gladys.
Okay. So do you want to comment on that one, Alyssa?
Sure. So part of this is really evaluating or allowing you to evaluate yourself to determine how well housing resilience policies, goals, and objectives are incorporated into your comprehensive plan, and also including equity principles. And one thing too that I think is important to note is based on your elements, how are maybe these like regulations trickling down to the policies of other plans that we're going to review. So what's the linkage and coordination to support, a resilient housing in your community from the original plan all the way down to the ground level program.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Now I'm going to the LMS.
Yep, tab 10 is local LMS.
Okay, and what do we have on that?
And so this is similar, just checking in about your housing resilience policies and goals and objectives and equity principles that impact the community. And so with the LMS, a lot of, at the county level, the LMS shows from the local comprehensive plan, some of the elements that are kind of brought over from the comp plan over to the LMS to help create that more resilient jurisdiction.
Okay. And the LHAP.
Yep, that's tab 11 is your LHAP. And so the LHAP, is really the program, right? So we're talking about how we're getting these dollars for mitigation out to your community. And so how well is your LHAP supporting these housing mitigation strategies? Is resilience incorporated into housing strategies, and does it address equity? And this also includes your incentive plan and your AHAC. And so does your AHAC represent advocacy, have representation of advocacy or expertise in mitigation and disaster recovery? And so the LHAP just has, I guess, a lot of pieces to it. Not a lot,
Yeah.
but a few different pieces to it.
Yeah, I'm just Christmas treeing an A plus here because so we can show you how it scores out. But these are just your regular incentives in your incentive plan. Some of you have some, not all. You get a point if you have them. So on here. And so that's how you do it. You just go on down and check those. Okay. I'll do a little bit more here, and then okay, now I'll go to the next one. And and sorry about all the jargon. LHAP, of course, is your local housing assistance plan.
Yep, and tab 12 is your post-disaster redevelopment plan. And so this was really important. This is a lot of good feedback that resulted from our original test group that we were able to further incorporate into this checklist. So, you know, as we recognize you guys as the planners and the experts in your community and all of the great work that you're doing, you know, if you notice something that would be valuable, just, you know, always feel free to let us know. It's really important that we get your perspective on that. So with the PDRP, you know, we're looking to see if housing mitigation and resilience techniques are incorporated in the rebuilding and redevelopment of your community's housing infrastructure. And are there specific strategies for low-income communities and communities of color to provide equity when you are working on your redevelopment plan?
Okay. That's that one. I'm having fun here filling it all in. This is how I did the SAT. Okay, so the CRS, this is for the community rating system. This goes over to your floodplain managers. So you're going to want to ask them to join you in this effort, okay? And so this one is all about National Flood Insurance Program. And we know that most of you are already getting major discounts in flood insurance because your floodplain managers are so adept at meeting these requirements. But we listed them out here, and we'll always take comments back on it of things we forgot or things that, you know, would be aspirational, but we didn't pick up.
Yeah, and one thing that is helpful with this tab too is the idea of, you know, what can you further implement to address the goals of the NFIP to maximize the incentive? So, you know, those are things that we thought about when we were building this framework out. So we thought that might be of value. Okay, so so next are the construction standards, the construction and retrofit. So part of this is identifying how your community, or if your community requires green building in housing development and redevelopment activities, and how well is floodplain management integrated with like green building practices in your community.
All righty. Then this one isn't scored, but you can answer it. Okay, this is just all about who's on the team. And what we're trying to get at is you're going to have some people that are in charge of your emergency management, of course, and then they do these local mitigation strategies. And this is just an acknowledgement of all of these different positions and people that would be representing these different parts of creating all of that. And so it's not all inclusive. And so we'd like you to add others that you may have in your group. Okay, and again, like I said, you don't get scored on this, but it is there. Okay, then this is ta-da, okay? This is the performance, the checklist progress and performance report, okay? And so this one here, we've got who's responsible for doing this particular tab, and this is suggested. Everybody, these ones don't get scored, you know, these first tabs about reach. And this way you can just check that we did it. So we're done with that one, okay? Because everybody's going to be using the same checklist, okay? So you just check if you did it or not. And then when you get down to the scoring ones, okay, starting here, this one I noticed I didn't check anything back then when we were talking. So you're at risk, resilience performer, because you got 0 points, okay? And then when I started to put some in, like the post-disaster recovery plan, I started checking a bunch and I got you up to 51%. So that would be average. So it's going to automatically populate for you what that plan is, okay? And so on. And then I did a whole bunch. Where's the LHAP? See, I did a bunch on that too. So, but I didn't fill it all the way out. I just wanted to show you that the score will show up. And then when you get to the bottom here, this will be your score for everything, okay? And so we're still at risk because we got zeros everywhere else. But this score, if you say, well, I don't have an LHAP, okay, then you're not going to have an accurate reading here, and just let us know and we will do the logic for you to show you what you are without an LHAP. But let me just say this, every single county has an LHAP, and if you're a small hamlet, you're probably under that LHAP, and so you would just want to connect with your LHAP people and say, what did you put there? So that way you could get a full score by filling out every single one. But like I said, if you don't want to fill them all out because you can't, let us know and we will do a, what do they call it, round the curve? Is that what they call it in school? So that you'll get a more accurate score, okay? So where are we now? We're done with, that's it, okay? That's the whole checklist. And like I said, it'll be Google Doc. You don't have to save it or anything. If you really want to download it to your desktop, some things could get wonky. So it's better to leave it up here. It's going to be in our folder. So we're going to be able to go in and see how you're doing. So just message us if you're stuck anywhere. Okay.
And
before we,
Gladys, oh.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in and say there are descriptions of the performance categories. And I know that we're going to get into that more in depth in the next webinar once everybody completes their part. And so, but there are specific descriptions of essentially like what type of, what does that mean when you are that category of performer? And it's not intended to be punitive in any way. It's a way to identify, oh, this is something that I didn't realize I could do very easily or incorporate or educate, you know, my elected officials about. So we just wanted to make note of that.
Okay.
yeah, thank
So
you. So
we did all that. You'll get this PowerPoint from us so you can look at those slides, but I didn't want to do it all and then do it all again. So we're here, right? So that's it.
click to the next one.
The next one. Oh, next steps.
Next
Okay.
steps. Next steps.
Mhm.
One more.
Okay, there we are.
So the thought was, we have a sign up form. So for those of you who are interested, it'll come in the next thing and you can get it from the chat box. We'll also send an email out to everyone who registered to ask you if you want to engage with this. We have to do these things for the grant documentation. So that's why we're working on this. We also know that there are, transmission challenges sometimes associated with Google Docs, and we want to make sure. So what we're going to do is, if you say, yes, I'm City X, we think we want to go through this, what we will do is we can get you a version that says City X, and then you will have that one. And so that's individual. Yay, Commissioner Danos would like to do one for City of Gulfport. Thank you. So Mary Helen says, do we have plans to do a follow-up score? Your score will be updated ongoing in the next, this is not a scoring for like a permanent score. Think of this as a diagnostics. How healthy are we? How resilient are we? And what we want by the third session for this is for you to have and we'll have other forms that we can kind of fill out, is basically what are the, like, let's say 5 key things or 2 things per plan that you intend to update. And that may be something you choose to do in 2022, not something you choose to do or can do now because it's not on the cycle. So we want to treat this as a, hey, here's some food for thought. Check the list in terms of we did this, we could make ourselves stronger by updating this and providing a new manual for construction and retrofit that actually addresses also site-specific flooding or something, right? So this is where the idea comes, like, what do we want to update, and then how do we do this? So this is the beta test. Don't think of this even as a real, it's like the SAT. We're going to keep changing it, right? But the point is to figure out where we are at today so we can become better. And so then if you want to take a big scoring thing in 2021, 2022, we want everybody to get up to whatever category you're in today. We know that you can move to a new category just by attentive addressing of a selective number of key policies and programs. The other counterpoint to that is this thing may have some really, we thought they were important, and you're going to come back and tell us, no, these points that you've measured in here are not important still, but you're missing something else altogether. And so that's the dialogue by meeting with you, participating in these, like, so team sessions. So since Commissioner Thanos is going to support Gulfport, well, I'll say, so hypothetically, we would get together with the Gulfport planning, housing, community development, resilience, emergency management, and then go through and talk about how to do this. So a similar step to this, and then how do you then take steps to move forward? And going through the checklist, completing your checklist to the best of your ability, taking some notes. That's where the comment section is. Gladys mentioned that one column. Where you can add your own comments into that. And these kinds of things will go forward. So lots of opportunities to make short-term corrections. So if some of you see, let's just say something that's like super egregious that needs to be addressed right away, our plan is to make a few changes in the next 3 days. So it will not affect scoring overall, but we can definitely understand where there's going to be things that may be more problematic for you. We also recognize that it takes a long time to get buy-in and updates, and you need funding to do a lot of these things. So that's where the questions about, we can't do this because, we didn't do this because, right? So it's important to diagnose what are the barriers to resilience housing planning scores, right? And maybe it's a political will thing. Maybe it is a, Sadowski funding hasn't come to us. We get pennies. What are we supposed to do? We can say mitigation, but then we don't have money for it. So it's an unfunded mandate. So we want to use this as the tool that helps us identify all of the problems that you guys face internally and externally that are affecting your ability. Some of it could be just easy updates. Others are going to be massive stakeholder meetings and massive pushback from certain folks in the development community, for example. So we know this, we know there's no easy solution. So other good comments for us on this, throwing this out, questions for Gladys and Alyssa.
Well, about how does the checklist recognize funding plans for elements? And we're not looking at your budgets. If you want to tell us something about that, put it in the comment field. This is something we're kind of doing with you. That's why we're offering the technical assistance. So we want to have those conversations with you about what you're thinking about it. Well, we have this funding, but then the funding is so and so. But that's the TA part of it. And it's not really to separate people into the ones that are doing great and the ones that aren't. It's just all about continuing to work on this together so that we can push resilience forward. And somebody had mentioned earlier that they Pasco had a grant from CDBG MIT mitigation grant for a planning grant. And congratulations to all of you who have gotten those grants. And we're excited to work with you on those to help make sure that you've got a good housing plug-in for that. So make sure to let us know, if you'd like help with that also with mitigation.
And
there was
comments on the having some issues with that really rough draft version back in October. So this one, a lot of the columns and fields have been locked. So we hope that there's not a lot of issues, and it should be just a more simple, as you saw, clicking the checkbox, right? So that will enable the calculations to auto-populate and that sort of thing, and then transferring, you know, from the bottom of one tab to the back of the last section. So, all right, now I'm going to do a gut check. We're going to be silent, and I'm going to ask you for your perspectives on this. So I don't want to call on people, but I would like you to tell us, does this seem feasible? Do you see the ability to work on this with a quick look at it now that you've had? Do you feel like I'm just going to stop talking and let you guys start chatting.
I'm looking at Mary Helen.
Thank you, Mary Helen.
I'm looking at Lynette. I'm looking at Hank.
We're looking at you.
I'm calling out here. What a group. Daphne's here.
One question I have, this is Mary Duke with Pasco County, is that sometimes the item is not where you, the Florida Housing Coalition, think it should be. Sometimes a local government may feel it's more appropriate to be in the Land Development Code or in the County Code of Ordinances or in some other document. I don't think your tool recognizes that the county may still have, or the local government may still have the policy, but it may not be where you think it should be. And so how is this tool addressing that?
Well, it's not, but like if you have that example and you see something over in the PDRP that is in somewhere else, just say, yeah, we do that. And then in the comments say, but it's in our land development regulations. Okay, this isn't a gotcha thing. We just want to know. And, you know, we want you to think about it.
But,
okay?
but the local government will miss out on the points.
No, because if you have it, it just happens to not be in the category we put it in. As long as you've completed it, just check yes. And then in the comment, in the column section where you can put a comment, says this is actually in X, Y, and Z document.
Okay.
You still get credit. We just got to understand where it went to.
Yeah, you own the checklist, checkies, okay? But if we see a lot of that, we're definitely gonna bring that up in the second session and figure out a fix for that. And we're learning too. Okay, so yeah, that's a good one there.
So Jennifer Malone, thank you. Question in the middle of updating the comprehensive plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County. Should we complete the checklist using the proposed or adopted language? So you guys have a lot of progress already on the city and county. We should set up a meeting with you and your team working on that to go through where you're at already and then what might be useful with the checklist.
Yeah, I mean, we thought about having categories called yes, it's in effect, we're working on it, and no, not ever. But we just figured we'd just say if you have it or not. And then if you could comment, like if it is planned, and you could comment, say yes, and then in the comment say we're adopting this in a few months or whatever. So we just want to know that.
So
it's not competitive.
Jennifer, I wasn't sure if I answered your question or if you were asking about the specific language in the checklist. What was your interest in discerning?
Yes, the specific language in the checklist, but I think you answered it. I think ultimately we'll circle back with you all on this, and I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I would say we do not consider the checklist as model language. Okay. We consider the checklist as a diagnostic tool to get to certain goals that we think may be more specific. We tried that. Kara has also put in, a lot of time helping me and Gladys walk through some of these things. We understand the challenges of, you know, moving from encourage to shall, and what you all face with those things. So yeah, we consider it as guidance, and to be, you know, integrated within the context of your political will, and how far you feel that your documents should go and could go, right?
But, you know, kind of for us at the coalition, the bottom line is those 7 mitigation principles. And we feel like if you can, if your plans will, if you do all those things, and you're going to end up with doing the magic 7. And that's all we're really looking for. It's not a high bar, really, because mitigation isn't that complicated. It's just a matter of prioritizing certain things, funding and attention and research and mapping and regulations and incentives toward fixing up all those houses, you know. And the other parts of reach are those maps. And CJ just brushed over those, but there's these maps now where you can see where the inundation levels are for your assisted housing. And then there's the social vulnerability mapping tools too. And so when you put all of that together, I'll give you an example that's not in your area, okay? This is Forest Creek in Pensacola, and it's a HUD funded apartment complex, 200 units. And so you can map it, and there it shows as an assisted property, okay? And then you start turning on the layers, and you bring in the storm surge and, you know, category 2, and sure enough, and the regular NFIP areas, okay? And sure enough, the whole thing's underwater. And then you turn on the low income census tract, and sure enough, you know, there's your assisted housing in the flood zone. And sure enough, this year, Forest Creek flooded for the 5th time, 8 feet of water in the units, 200 people displaced. Now they're displaced forever because they've been going back and forth for 5 years about, oh, do we buy it or not? Okay, so that's how it really gets.
So I just want to say I would like to ask Commissioner Thanos to speak, and then Hank, who also has his hand raised. Thank you.
So I might be being optimistic, but it looks like if I sent this PowerPoint to different departments in Gulfport, and mind you, we're so little, and then if they pick people to come to a meeting where we could all sit together and just have the spreadsheet in front of us, and they brought whatever documents they needed, we could do this in an hour or 2. Yeah. Am I on drugs, or is that possible?
We assume that each of the plan managers knows their plan well enough that they will be able to, you know, go through their own checklist in a fairly hour. I don't know, maybe they need to refresh or revisit, but maybe 2 to 3 hours. The comp plan might be more complicated than the others, but that was the intent of splitting it up by tab, by department manager or plan manager, so that it could be done fast. And that one person then would, you know, senior planner or community development person, whoever's the closest to understanding all of this, would be the one to just, you know, you guys talk through it together and figure it out. So no, you've you know, got this. Yes, that's true. All these and many of these documents are huge documents. So the point of why the plan manager knows what's in them and how it relates to the, you know, 15 or 20 items we've put there, and what else they might need to say. So that's why I wouldn't recommend having somebody who doesn't know what the PDRP has in it trying to read the PDRP and then fill out, you know, these other forms. So we know some people's comp plans are like 900 pages too. So figuring out.
Luckily ours
oh, good.
Ours isn't that bad.
And we're here for you. You know, yes. Just pop us an email or call, and we'll get in
we
there.
Have the form. We have that form to send out. So first I'm going to ask Hank.
Go ahead.
So I have a clarifying question and then a request. I'm looking at the bottom for April 13th, and it says define local and regional actions. Are you thinking that, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but do you think an outcome of this would be to help inform some of the content and goals in the regional action plan?
It is definitely possible.
Okay.
So the priority of this is, that's why we're asking for the checklist to everybody to do it to their best of the ability, because if it helps point to new things that we need to focus on that are not in, so the place chapter workshops on housing and mitigation will be in February. So we will have
Right.
come through those goals, and things that we learn from you all will then help us as you all participate, and we re-review what do we think we want to do regarding housing and resilience and goals and training, or it could be wind related. It could be a whole series of things that you will uncover for the region.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
I guess that, you know, if it does inform it, it underscores the importance of going through the process to get it done. The request, and you know, I don't know, you just mentioned sending out a form, and I haven't gone back through on emails, but what would be great is if there were some type of invitation or introductory type language that could be shared with department staff or supervisors to garner support for staff engagement, right? So instead of, you know, me, you know, I'm thinking about the greater good of the group, right? So instead of me trying to summarize what you all said on this PowerPoint and my knowledge of this project, being a project partner and trying to rally the troops, so to speak, is there some common language that we can all use, you know, to share among staff to, you know, gain support to participate in this and put in the time, you know, and also having something that's, you know, shared can help will gain the attention of leadership, so to speak, even though, you know, I can always ask my colleagues, you know, to get on a meeting and do this, but I want to be able to, you know, send this to directors and things like that. So it'd be great to have something a little more official than what I can cobble up based on my recollection.
Okay, so we will, we're going to take this presentation, we'll whack it down into something that you could use as a facilitator. We will come up, so I'm rephrasing it, come up with a some kind of compelling invitation and overview email. And yeah, that will be good. So Alyssa, can you go to the next screen, please? Because we need to get
Oh, I think
people
that's
out of here.
me. That's
Yes,
me.
so
Yes.
if you can copy that, let's get that. We need to get that HTML into the chat so that they can log on.
Can somebody do that? Talking about me? I can't touch it. So Alyssa, can you grab it and put it in chat?
So the what we have is this, it's a very simple email sign up form for those of you who want to. So it's again, purpose for documentation for the grants and also to help us manage request and time. It's basically so now thank you, Hank. It's in the chat box. So when you go in there, and what you will see is it's just asking, you know, yes, I want to get the checklist. Here's my name as the team lead. I'm thinking about some other, if you don't know who your team is yet, you don't have to. It's we just want to have that directed request so that we have, you know, we won't be burdening you with like tons and tons of emails. So the follow-up will come from that. So please go there and access that, and we will provide so the question is has been brought up to me before when I was sharing this early on, was the process, is 1 month enough to do the checklist, at least a couple of them to go through that exercise? Do you feel that if we got you the materials this week, you would still be able to, let's say, get a meeting with your team in a week and a half or 2 weeks, explain that, then they would have another week to go through and, you know, find 2 hours out of their time to fill the document out and get it back? I feel like you guys are on tons of workshops and webinars and meetings. I know that it's our fault, so you can blame us, but is this possible for you to do this in this time frame? Because we didn't actually send you the date for March 30th because of that actual question. If you feel like too many of you, if you need to go to March 30th to get it done, and we need to push the second session, so now is the time to you know, say that you're going to be gone on spring break for a week and a half, you'll be COVID safe, but you can't get this done on time. So, you know, let us know what you need. This is where we want to hear, is March 30th are March 12th and March 30th reasonable for you?
I think when they get it, you know, when they fill out the, I want it, and then we will send them the link to theirs and they look at it, then you'll know.
Oh,
That'll
thank you,
help.
Lynette. Linda Fisher, we know Pinellas, she would appreciate the extra time. Anyone else who's got major heartburns, now is the time. Really don't feel like, you know, I'm gonna...
This is Hank again. I would say to get a good facilitated meeting and have all the parties that ideally should be at the table for the review. It's going to take just a month to lock that down. You know, it's going to be hard to walk away from this call and get all the right people on a conference call in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you know, so it'd be nice to have some leniency. Plus, we've got all the calls coming up with the regional action plan for those who are involved, and then the Clear Sky project for those who are involved in that. And you know, there's some stuff.
All right, so folks have, okay, thank you, Nick. You're saying, I appreciate the wide range approach to housing, access, and infrastructure. Please consider including.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So mid-April. All right. So we've heard you. We understand you. We'll push this 2 more weeks out. Okay. So we'll check. We have to check with all of the Florida Housing Coalition, everybody's dates and schedules, but we'll look at the upcoming activities, and our goal is to really get this information back by May 1st. So we can make sure that we collect any input that we need to go into the regional action plan, but we respect all of the rest of the work that you guys are doing. So thank you for your time. It's just a few minutes past. If you have additional comments or questions, you can reach Gladys, Juanita, Alyssa, myself, as well as other folks who are working on it. I want to just say thank you to Kara and to Simone for the work and time that they've put into it, as well as the other team members on REACH from USF and UF who've been that, and also for many county staff and city coalition members who've also given us early input. So thanks for making this better, and we hope it helps you. And we'll be in touch soon. So we'll see some follow-up emails from us in the next day or 2. Thank you for your time today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.